Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So even though we have like 3 months until the start of the 2024-2025 season, I think to be exact, October 10th of 2024 is the first night, is opening night. Vegas doesn't care about that. They already released their full odds for every single individual awards. And if you've been following me for a while, my other platforms are on YouTube. You know I love to bet on the long-term awards, on the awards, and especially give out some long-term plays of underdog guys. Put a lot of money on Leo Carlson to win the Calder last year at like 40 to 51. It was looking really good at one point. Then he ended up getting hurt. I did hit on a Nathan MacKinnon 18 to 1. If you follow me on Instagram or TikTok, you probably saw that one. So we're going to go through it. I'm going to give you 2 dark horse picks for every single award. All of these guys are at least going to be, I think my lowest odds guy is still 15 to 1. So it's still a pretty heavy underdog, pretty heavy long shot. So let's get into it. We're going to start, of course, with the Hart Trophy. You look at it, McDavid, heavy favorite. Nathan MacKinnon next. Jackie was at 10 to 1. Actually surprised me that he was that high. But I am going to be going with Kirill Kaprizov at 20 to 1. When looking at Kirill Kaprizov, I was surprised that he was this low. I was expecting him to be like 30 to 1. But even at 20 to 1, I still think there is a ton of value for a guy like Kirill Kaprizov. When you look at it, last year he had 46 goals, 50 assists, 96 points in 74 games, and he had a slow start to start the season. In his final 46 games, he had 38 goals, 33 assists for 71 points, which if you average that out to an 82-game season is 67 goals and 59 assists for 126 points. Yes, I understand that he's not going to put up that point total, but this guy could legitimately go for 50 and 50, maybe even 55 and 55, because when you look at prior seasons, I mean, last year in 67 games, he had 40 goals, 35 assists. 2022, he had 47 goals and 61 assists for 108 points. So Kirill Kaprizov is clearly the offensive engine of the Minnesota Wild, and especially when he was put, they actually played Matt Boldy, Joel Eriksson Ek, and Kaprizov together, and they were one of the best lines in the NHL. Last year, they had a 62% expected goals percentage. They outscored people 29 to 18 last year, and among the 29 lines that played 350 minutes last year at even strength, they led the entire NHL, among those 29 at least, in terms of goals per 60 minutes at 4.64. So if that line plays together all year, I think the Minnesota Wild are going to be a better team. They got off to just such a bad start last year. If they're a playoff team, if they're a safe playoff team in the Central Division, really anything's possible outside of like Dallas and Colorado is probably going to be number 1 and number 2, but I think Winnipeg is going to fall back a decent amount. So in looking at it, if they can be a 105-point team like they were in prior seasons, it's not ridiculous to say. If they can do that and you get Kirill Kaprizov and he scores 50 goals and 65 assists or something like that, not saying that he'd be the favorite. And realistically, in order to hit on one of these Hart bets, you kind of got to bank on like a Connor McDavid 5-game injury or something like that. But in terms of a long shot, in terms of at 20 to 1, I don't hate Kirill Kaprizov at 20 to 1, considering this guy's offensive output last year and just how amazing he was at the end of last year. I think I'm going to sprinkle. I'm going to put like $5 on that just for the hell of it. Also, another real long shot is Igor Shesterkin at 70 to 1. When looking at Shesterkin, he had a rough start to this season, but down the stretch, his final 20 games, he had a .930 for the Rangers and then just utterly carried them throughout the playoffs. So I think people might be looking out for him entering the season if he's going to carry them yet again. He is their most important player. Obviously, he's the goaltender, and he has been a Hart finalist before. In 2022, he only played 52 games and was a Hart finalist. He had a .935 save percentage. So if he can potentially replicate that, a guy like Jonathan Quick was very good last year, but he has been wildly sporadic in the last 5 to 6 years. So if he kind of comes out, shows some signs of his age and plays bad, and Shesterkin has to play 60 to 65 games, puts up a .930, .935, like we know that he's maybe that he is capable of, on top of, I think, Artemi Panarin's not going to go for 120 points. You can maybe be talking about Igor Shesterkin becoming the first goalie to win the Hart Trophy since Carey Price in 2015. Again, not saying it's going to happen 70 to 1, but I would probably have him pegged at like 30 or 40 to 1. So maybe you sprinkle some money if you're a New York Rangers fan. I'm going to do it just because, like, if God forbid he wins the Hart and Ranger fans are bragging about that, I want to at least get some scratch on that. But next up, we got the Norris Trophy. And yeah, Cale Makar favored at 300. Then you got Hughes and Fox. The first guy that really stuck out to me is Charlie McAvoy is at 50 to 1. Like, 50-1. I know he's not the best offensive defenseman, but he's been putting up around 60-ish point pace the last couple years. So if he can get to 70, 75, as well as being fantastic defensively, and we know now in 2023, Hampus Lindholm was like better than him. He's clearly better than Hampus Lindholm. He is the no doubt number one defenseman in Boston. So when looking at it, if he can get 70, 75 points, similarly when we're talking about the Hart Trophy with McDavid, Cale Makar gets hurt all the goddamn time. You can like almost bet on a Cale Makar 5 to 10 game injury throughout a season. So if no guy really has an extreme offensive season, you could be looking at Charlie McAvoy. The Boston Bruins are yet again a top 5 team in the NHL. Charlie McAvoy has 70 points, top 10, top 5 percentile defensive analytics. He could easily win. So at 50-1, when I saw that on FanDuel, I was genuinely shocked. I thought that he'd be like 20, 25-1. I'm not saying he's like a heavy favorite because, again, he's not a big offensive guy, but at 50-1, I think there's a ton of value. My second guy, you got to walk with me on this. You're going to say I'm absolutely crazy. And again, this is like an ultimate long shot. He has the farthest odds by far of anybody that I'm going to mention. Jake Sanderson at 120-1. It's not going to happen. Don't get me wrong. But in terms of a long shot, you look at Jake Sanderson and the step that he took. His rookie year was very good. He was even better last year, 38 points in like 76 games. He went from like 20 minutes a night to 23 minutes a night. They just traded Jacob Chikrin. So he's probably going to play between 24 to 25 minutes a night. I think he is far better than Thomas Chabot. I believe he's playing on the top power play while Chabot plays on the second power play. So again, I don't, it's 120-1. Bet on McAvoy, then maybe sprinkle some on Sanderson. I would maybe bet a prop for him to be like a Norris finalist. If that was at 30-1 or like 40-1, I would hammer that. But I think Sanderson could really break out this season. Again, I'm not saying Ottawa's going to be a safe playoff team, but if they make the playoffs and Jake Sanderson has 65-ish points and is fantastic defensively, he could potentially get some Norris buzz and end up being a Norris finalist. I'm not saying he's going to could potentially win it. It's probably not going to happen, but at 120-1, why not sprinkle that? When looking at the Calder, they really don't give a ton of people like any chance. So if I were to bet on this, there's no clear like dark horses. I'm not going to tell you to go bet on like Kovalenko, but like bet on Lane Hudson at 7-1. I think that's pretty solid value when looking at how productive he was in the NCAAs in terms of offensively. Montreal's defense core outside of Mike Matheson, he's going to be the clear second best offensive defenseman. I would say bet on Lane Hudson. Next up, we move over to the Vezina Trophy for the best goalie, and there's one name that I think is fantastic value, and then one name that I think is a really good long shot. And when looking at that left side, UC Saros at 15-1. What are we doing there? When looking at him, I think people just forget how good he is because he did have a down year, only having a .906 save percentage this season. But in 2020, he had a .914 in 40 out of 70 games. 2021, a .927 in 36 out of 56 games. 2022, a .918 in 67 games. 2023, a .919 in 64 games. He has led the NHL in games started the last 3 years, ahead of Connor Hellebuck. And yes, this year was a down year, but he didn't have like that impressive of a team behind him, if I'm being honest. And I think the team has improved a ton this offseason. This might be the best team that he's had in front of him. I think he's going to be able to rack up some wins. So I think it's perfectly reasonable that he returns to being a top 5 goalie like he was the prior 3 seasons. So again, the fact that there's guys like Markstrom ahead of him. Linus Ullmark has the same odds as UC Saros. What are we doing there? I think betting on UC Saros, I'm definitely going to put a lot of money on UC Saros winning this because Nashville should be a playoff team with all the ads that they made. And I still think UC Saros is their best player. I think he's honestly, when you compare how good they are goalies to defensemen, I do think he is their best player over like a Roman Josi. So I'm personally high on UC Saros. He's been my guy for a couple of years. So to get him at 15-1, I think that is fantastic value, and you definitely should look into that. My other guy, my more so long-term play guy, Stuart Skinner at 50-1. I don't think that he's a top 10 goalie. I don't think that he's gonna, even if he wins the award, I don't think he's gonna be the best goalie in the NHL. But when looking at it, the guy had a .913 in 50 games in his first season. He had a horrible start to the year this most recent season, but in his final 46 games, he had a .916. So in looking at it, under Chris Knobloch, if the Oilers really hit the ground running, I think we can agree they're probably the favorites to win the President's Trophy, considering they just made the Stanley Cup final. They were the best team the final 60, 65 games of the season last year, and they like only added to their team. So in looking at it, I think Stuart Skinner could win 40, 42, 43 games. He's probably going to be this. Well, he's definitely going to be like the starter, no shit. But he's probably going to have a pretty high workload. I don't think Calvin Pickard is going to get like 25 to 30 games. So if you get a Stuart Skinner that starts 60 games on the best team in the entire NHL, the advanced stats probably aren't going to dictate a Vezina win, but value at 50 to 1 is fantastic there. I'm probably going to sprinkle it a little bit. The Rocket Richard, Austin Matthews, heavy favorite, and I'm not going to lie, at minus 115. I agree with them. If anybody's going to win the Rocket Richard, Austin Matthews is going to have to get hurt. Like, I hate to say it, like, if he's fully healthy, he's basically a lock to get 60 goals at this point, probably like 62. So in all these scenarios that I discussed, this is assuming an Austin Matthews 5 to 10 game injury. I hate to say it, but in order for someone to win, this is what we would need. Up first, Mikko Rantanen, 30 to 1. It shocked me. I made an Instagram story like a week ago about this, but 30 to 1 for a guy that scored 55 goals a year ago. This year, he only had 42, but I think if Nathan MacKinnon takes more of a passing approach next year, and just regardless, Mikko Rantanen can easily get you mid-50s goals. So if Austin Matthews doesn't have this fantastic goal-scoring season, him being, again, 50 to 1, we can go back to who's ahead of him. Guys like, I don't think Zach Hyman's putting up the same numbers next year. I don't think that Nikita Kucherov having the same odds as Mikko Rantanen's absurd to me. So, I don't think Philip Forsberg, although he had more goals last year than Rantanen, I'd predict Rantanen to have more goals than than Philip Forsberg. So I think Rantanen is very good value at 30 to 1. Another guy that I'm going to get hate on, I'm going to get called an Ottawa Glazer for this, but Brady Tkachuk, when looking at Brady Tkachuk, when looking on the amount of shots that this guy puts on net, and don't get me wrong, a lot of that is net front, just whacking at the puck, but this guy pounds shots on net. He had 357 last year. He only shot 10.4%. So if he could just have an extremely high shooting year, similarly to a Zach Hyman last year, and when we talk about it, again, Austin Matthews gets hurt for 5 to 10 games. I think Brady Tkachuk, 37 goals last year while only shooting 10.4%. If he got extremely lucky, I think that there's some value there that he could end up in the 50s somehow. And God, somehow, I would definitely bet Rantanen at the same odds way before Tkachuk, but I think Tkachuk is a half decent odd. I think he's probably going to get 40 goals next year. So I would maybe sprinkle a little bit on Brady Tkachuk. And lastly, we got the Jack Adams Trophy. When looking at this, Sheldon Keefe, Travis Green are the favorites right now. When thinking about it, usually think about a new coach that takes a non-playoff team to the playoffs or like improves them a ton. That's usually your Jack Adams winner. So my number one value guy, and again, I don't think I'm being biased when I say this, Patrick Waugh at 30 to 1 is absolutely insane, in my opinion. When looking at him, he has the same odds as Luke Richardson, the Sharks coach, Columbus's coach, like Mike Sullivan, Paul Maurice, Paul Maurice, great coach. He ain't winning the goddamn Jack Adams after being a 109-point team. I think all the elements are there for a potential Patrick Waugh win, considering the fact that he's won it. He won it in 2014 with the Colorado Avalanche. So I think there's great value in this. The Islanders went 20-12-5 under Patrick Waugh, which was a 100-point pace. Last year, the Islanders had the worst penalty kill in the entire NHL. A lot of that was what Lane Lambert instilled to the team. So if they can improve on that and get better goaltending from Sorokin, don't get me wrong, that's not really a Patrick Waugh thing. He's not the goalie coach. But if they can just shore up those two things on top of adding a guy like Anthony Duclair, on top of Carolina probably falling off a decent amount, the New York Rangers might not be as good. I know the Capitals and the Devils should be better, but that's not a guarantee. I think that this New York Islanders team could be highly competitive and could jump from a 94-point team to maybe like 105 points, and Patrick Waugh could potentially win the Jack Adams Trophy. I don't think that is far-fetched. And as for my second pick, Andre Tourigny of the Utah Hockey Club, 20 to 1. When looking at him, he has all the recipes of a Jack Adams winner. I think the NHL is going to want to root for Utah, and they only had 77 points last year, made all these massive changes with the defense core. They're going to be a far better team. It's not ridiculous to think that they can go from like a 77-point team to a 95-point playoff team. I don't think it's going to be because Tourigny is this fantastic coach. I think it's more so the young talent rising and the defense core just being far better. But when looking at the Jack Adams, they really just give it to the guy whose team like improves the most and ends up making the playoffs. It's not always the best coach. So those are some of my value long shot picks. If you want to go bet on them, those all came from FanDuel. I'm not sponsored by FanDuel or anything like that. But yeah, let me know in the comments. What do you think about these picks? Am I absolutely out of my mind? Again, I'm not picking these guys to win the goddamn thing. I'm just looking at the value, and I'll be seeing you in the next one.